Hey guys, welcome to your very first lecture. I am very excited for this. So I'm sure I've explained it already, but if I have not, the way these lectures are going to work, I'm going to post them probably on Sunday sometime. You have the entire day on Sunday and Monday to watch the lecture, take notes, follow along in your textbook, and then the rest of the week, starting on Tuesday, we will do activities based on what we learned in the lecture. So I'm starting on page 3 in my textbook. You should have your physical textbook open next to you, as well as a notebook to take some notes. And if you want to have your digital textbook open on your Chromebook or computer, that is fine as well. So our first thing we're talking about is chapter 1, again, page 3. Let's just get started. In this first section, I've split it up into 3 sections. So in between, you can get up and stretch. I'm going to try to move through it pretty quickly so that you're not sitting here for hours upon hours. So in this first section, we're going to be talking about white keys, black keys, flats and sharps, and harmonic equivalents, half steps and whole steps, and double flats and sharps. So let's first start by talking about letter names. This diagram is directly from your textbook, so you can look at it in your textbook as well. Our letter names are A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. You need to get really good at counting up and down the ladder by being able to say like A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and G, F, E, D, C, B, A. When you get really good at it, you can say the entire alphabet backwards like I can. Ask me to do it in class. I'm really proud of it. You also need to be good at, you need to start practicing, I should say, saying, counting in thirds, both up and down the ladder. So the way that I like to do it, let me get my little laser pointer here, is you start here, and you go A, C, E, G, B, D, F, A, C, E. So you're just skipping one in between, and eventually you should be really good at going like A, C, E, G, B, D, F, A, C, E, G, B, D, F, and then similarly backwards, which is harder for me, so I will be doing it slower, going A, F, D, B, G, E, C, A, F, D, B, G, E, C. Counting in thirds and counting in steps is going to be really important for you, especially because you have a quiz that includes some of those questions at the end of the week. Let's talk about pitch class versus pitch. So when we're talking about our letter names, each letter name is going to reappear in every 8th position, and this is called an octave, oct being the root word, that the root meaning 8, right? So octave, like October, even though October isn't the 8th month, but I can tell you why that is. It used to be the 8th month until freaking Augustus Julius, the worst, or Julius Augustus. I think Julius Augustus. He's terrible. So I get distracted. I'm going to try not to do this so that your lectures are short. I'm so sorry. So each letter name reappears every 8th position, and this is called an octave. Notes that are related to each other by octave are in the same pitch class. We call it a pitch class. So every D on the keyboard is in the same pitch class. Every C on the keyboard is in the same pitch class. Every E flat on the keyboard is in the same pitch class. And this is different than saying individual pitches, like, well, the highest note I can sing is a C6, and that would be calling a specific pitch. Okay? So here is your keyboard. There you see white keys and black keys. There's a pattern of black keys where it goes group of 2, group of 3, group of 2, group of 3, etc. We're going to start on the white keys. The white keys have just our regular letter names. So this right here, we start with a C. So it goes C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. So then our pitch class C would be every single, well, even this little guy over there would be our pitch class C. Okay? I'm going to keep one red dot right there as reference. Okay, so that's our C. Hopefully you know your piano names already. If you don't, this is a great opportunity for you to learn them. So middle C is often used as a reference point. It's because it's the C closest to the middle of the piano keyboard. And we use C because C builds our major scale on white keys. So from here to here, if you play all the white keys, it's going to sound like your major scale, your do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Okay? So those are your white keys. Cool? Let's talk about your black keys. So I'm going to redraw my little dot there for my C. Okay. So black key pitches are named in relation to white key pitches. So black keys immediately above or to the right of a white key are going to get the white key's name plus a sharp. So if this is my C, and this note directly above it or to the right of it would be my C sharp. Okay? If this is my E, E is not a good example. If this is my G, the note directly above it would be the G sharp. Okay? And then we also have the opposite that happens. We have the notes immediately below or to the left of a note get that note's name plus a flat. So this would be an E flat, a D flat, a G flat. Okay? Cool. We also have this cute little sign right there. That is our natural sign. So it takes any sharped or flatted note and just returns it to its white key position. Okay? Let's talk a little bit about enharmonics. So as you saw on the previous slide, which I will go back to in just a second, or maybe you've noticed it already, black keys can have two different names. And it can be the same note, but with one name. I'll show you. So this note right here could be a D flat, or it could be a C sharp, right? This blue note could be a C sharp or a D flat. That's called an enharmonic. This note has two different names, even though it sounds the same, okay? Not every sharped or flatted pitch is going to be a black note. Just a little heads up in there, and I'll show you on this next one as we're talking about half steps and whole steps. So a half step, I'll get to half steps in just a second. Actually, I want to back up. So if this is a C sharp and this is a D flat, right? We're moving to the note directly above or directly below. Well, in the case of these note groupings right here, it has no black key. So this C, if I want to flat the C, I go to the note directly below it, and that would be the B. So the B's enharmonic would be C flat. And the opposite way too. If I want to sharp this B, I have to go right here. So the C's enharmonic name could be B sharp as well. Same with E and F. It's the same. E sharp would be an F, and F flat would be an E. Okay, now let's talk about half steps and whole steps. So the distance between any two notes is called an interval, interval. An interval. Our most basic intervals are half steps and whole steps. So on the keyboard, a half step spans the distance between any two notes that are right next to each other. So from C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, these are all half steps, right? Okay, those are all half steps. A whole step is, or a whole tone, sometimes we call them whole tones or semitones as well. A whole step or whole tone is going to be two half steps together. So from here to here, because we have one half step, two half steps, that's a whole step, okay? Half step, half step. So from here to here would be a whole step. Usually it's going to be white key to white key or black key to black key would be your whole step, except in the cases of these tricky ones right here, because now we have half step, half step. So from B to C sharp is a whole step, and from E to F sharp is a whole step, etc., etc. F to E flat and C to B flat are both whole steps. Even though they look maybe a little bit bigger, they're still a whole step. Okay? Hopefully that makes sense. Let's move on to our second section. So in this section, we are going to be talking about staff notation, specifically in the treble clef and the bass clef. School doesn't start for another 2 days as I'm recording this, so I do not know how much of this you know already. Hopefully you know it, but if you don't, again, a refresher course. So staff notation started a long time ago with these Catholic monks. Basically, the story is that the Pope was mad because all the chant that they were doing was starting to sound different. And he was like, you got to find a way to write it down. And so they were like, okay. And then this guy, Guido d'Arezzo, who's my favorite dude ever, he came up with the idea of using these, breves or notes or neumes, there's a lot of different words for them, on lines. And so it started with 1 line and then 2 lines, and now we have 5 lines. The way that we count them, again, this is directly from your textbook on page 8. So if you'd like to look at this somewhere other than a screen, we start from the bottom and we count them up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You have 5 lines, 4 spaces. This is what your pitches on lines and spaces should look like. The lower a note is on the staff, the lower the pitch is going to be, and the higher a note is on the staff, the higher the pitch is going to be. Okay, that never changes. Let's talk about the treble clef. So again, this is directly from your textbook. This is on page 9. The treble clef is also known as the G clef, and it's because it was like the first line that Guido was like, well, let's name this line G, and then he wrote a G next to it. And because they're monks and because they like to write fancy, it eventually turned into this kind of symbol, which doesn't really look like a G, kind of maybe, but there you go. It sits right on the G line. So any note that sits on this line right here, as you can see, it's circled. That is going to be a G note, no matter what. You'll find it on the keyboard. It's the G above middle C. And then you can just fill in everything else because you know your musical alphabet. We have some ledger lines here, right? Here's middle C. That's directly in the middle of your keyboard. It's an important note. It's right in the middle, right? So you could do it that way, or you could come up with a mnemonic based on lines and spaces. So for me, I learned when I was growing up, every good boy deserves fudge for my lines, and then the spaces, you don't have to come up with anything because it spells face, F-A-C-E. I had one girl who got really mad when I was teaching her every good boy deserves fudge, and she was like, but girls deserve fudge too. And I was like, great, make one about girls deserving fudge. So she said every girl better deserve fudge. You can come up with whatever you want. If you already have one, go ahead and write that down in your notes right now. If you want to come up with a new one just for yourself, do that. The book has some cute ones. Every good bird does fly, or every good Bond drives fast, like Bond, James Bond. Only do it for the lines because, again, the spaces are already done for you, so we don't want to make more work for you. Go ahead and pause me now if you're still doing that. I'm going to move on to how to write accidentals. So when we are writing accidentals, that would be our sharps or our flats or our naturals. They're not accidental at all, but we call them accidentals anyway. We need to make sure that when we're writing a note on the staff, the accidental comes to the left of the note. So if I'm writing a note, then my accidental, my sharp, or my flat is going to be on the left side of the note. When I'm spelling something, if I'm just like spelling G sharp, the accidental comes on the right side of the note, okay? Hopefully that makes sense. It's just something to start thinking about right now because it drives me crazy, and you will get marked down on it on the AP exam if you do it wrong. So that's how you do it. If you're spelling it, it goes to the right. If you are putting it on the staff, it goes to the left. Okay? Here's your bass clef. Just like treble clef, bass clef started out as a letter. I think it was like the second line that Guido added, and it's the F clef. And again, monks are fancy, so it turned into that. Blame the monks. It sits on the second line down or the fourth line up, and that line would be the F line. So any note that's on that line is going to be the F below middle C. So here's your middle C again. That gives you an idea of where the relationship is between the treble and the bass clef. They're pretty close together. Okay? You can fill in the blanks if you want, or again, you can come up with a mnemonic device. The mnemonic device that I always learned was Great Big Dogs Fight Animals. I thought that was kind of depressing, so I changed it to Great Big Dogs Feel Amazing. You can change that if you want. My spaces was All Cows Eat Grass. Come up with your own. Again, the book has some cute ones like Great Big Doves Fly Away, or All Cars Eat Gas, All Cows Eat Grass. Whatever you want. You can be like Giant Babies Definitely Fight Aliens. I just came up with that one. So whatever you want, you're going to do that right now. Create your own mnemonic and put it in your notes. I'm going to move on. Pause me if you need to. So let's talk about naming registers. So to differentiate between all of our different octaves, we need to come up with different octave registers. So here's our entire keyboard. Here's our middle C that I've referenced so many times already. Because C, again, is kind of our basis for the major scale, we start on C everywhere. So the lowest C on the keyboard is called C1. The highest C on the keyboard is called C8, and then everything else is filled in between. These notes down here below C1 are labeled 0. So we have A0, A sharp / B flat 0, and B0, okay? This would be C1. All of the other notes after C1 are also going to be named 1. So D1, F sharp 1, A1, B flat 1, until we get to C2. And then the same thing happens. C3, the same thing happens. C4, the same thing happens. C5, the same thing happens, etc., etc., etc. So when we are reading a piece of music, knowing that this note right here was the middle C that I referenced both in the bass clef and the treble clef, that's the C4. That's going to help you name the registers when you need to, okay? This is my highest note on a good day. Once I hit this note right here, the E flat 6, and it was the best day of my life, but I have not really been able to do it since, at least not prettily. So there you go. Let's move on to our very last section. This is pitch number 3. We are going to be talking about C clefs, the bane of my existence, ledger lines, dynamic markings. There's a typo right there. Practice, writing notes on a score. We'll also be talking about like some stuff like musical periods and different things like that. Just kind of everything in the back of this chapter I put in this one section. So let's talk about C clefs. I hate a C clef, but we have to learn them because they're important. So this is the C clef. Wherever it's sitting, whatever line it's on, that is C4 or middle C, right there. That's it. Okay? So we can move it around wherever we want, and wherever we sit it is going to be our middle C. We mostly just use alto and tenor clef, but sometimes you'll see soprano, mezzo-soprano, and baritone clef as well. You can come up with mnemonic devices for these right here. We don't use them often enough, in my opinion, for you to do that. This is one of the reasons why it's important for you to know how to count by thirds, is specifically for C clef. So I would just recommend counting by thirds, or just like filling in everything, just because we use them so seldom. Okay, so that's your C clef. I hate them. You will too, unless you play the viola, and then you're ahead of the game with this alto clef right here. Okay, ledger lines. We're going to read ledger lines just like every other note on the staff or any other line on the staff. They're just continuing up. We count line space, line space, line space. So here's an example right here. This note right here would be a G because your top note on the treble is an F. So we're following line space. This is a G, and then we just continue up. A, B, C, and look, they've even given you your register names with it. Same thing right here. Here's your middle C or C4. Then we have D4, E4, D sharp 4, and E4 again. So that's how ledger lines work. Okay? Sometimes you're writing something or you're transcribing something and it is very, very high or very, very low, and you don't necessarily want to use ledger lines very much. That's where the ottava signs come in. You write these above or below the staff, and it just means play an octave higher or play an octave lower. And sometimes you don't see them, and then you're like, oh man, I was supposed to be playing an octave lower that entire time. You know, it happens. Okay, let's talk about dynamics. Well, most musical terms are going to be in Italian because that's kind of where this was all like this Western music was solidified, was in Italy. So let's learn some Italian terms. Here we have piano, which means soft. We have forte, which means strong. The piano that we know today, the instrument, originally was called the pianoforte because it was the first keyboard instrument that could play both soft and loud before they had the organ and the harpsichord, and you had one volume with those. And then all of a sudden you have the piano, and it's like, wow, we can have emotion in our music. It's great. Mezzo means middle or medium. And then anytime in Italian you see this issimo at the end, that's going to mean like very or a lot. So we go from pianissimo, very soft, piano, soft, mezzo piano, medium soft or middle soft, mezzo forte, medium strong or like middle strong. We have forte meaning strong and fortissimo meaning very strong. Down here we have our crescendo, the sign for it looks like you're growing louder. That's what a crescendo means. And then we have a diminuendo, which is just the opposite, getting smaller, a diminishing. Sometimes people like to call this term a decrescendo. You can if you want. It's not wrong per se, but it does help, I think, to have a little bit more of a differentiation, a different term between crescendo and this over here, calling it a diminuendo rather than a decrescendo. Here are your style periods. I could talk for forever about style periods. I love music history. It's so much fun. You can look in your textbook. I'm going to look at what page this is on. This is on page 18 through 19, and you can look at some of the popular composers from this time. Listen to some songs of theirs on YouTube so you get an idea of what these style periods sound like. We will mostly be staying within these first 5. Modern and contemporary, that is a hard word, is when it starts to get weird. Like when they're like, what is music? Music is a bathtub. And it starts to get weird. So we're going to stick within these first 5. Mostly, actually, we'll probably be sticking within like Baroque, classical, romantic eras, but we will talk about Renaissance and medieval music as the year goes on. Okay? This next slide, this is all of the practice that you can do. Now, this is not required. I'm not going to require it for homework. This is just for you if you feel kind of iffy on any of these subjects. I'll be posting a video of me doing the beginning of each of these examples and for you to finish out the end just for practice. Again, I won't be grading it. It's just for you. So right here, these are all the page numbers, and then here are the examples that you will do. I will do the ones directly before all of these. Okay? I'll post a video for that one too. Okay, and that is the end of our show, people. That's it. So if you have any questions, write them down, and I will see you in class.